Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation titled Robots in Timberland Towards Fine-Grained Semantic Mapping by UAVs in Forest for Diameter Estimation. So let me start this presentation by asking a question. How do you think forestry researchers go about the act of forest preservation? So do they just plant a lot of trees and hope for the best? Well, not exactly. There's a lot of process involved in that. And let me explain that by introducing the concept of silviculture, which is basically a branch of forestry science that allows researchers to deeply understand the structure, the composition, and the growth of the forests to better assess the needs of both the environment and humans. So in order to do this, they basically need to measure the geometric structure of the trees very accurately. And in order to do that, they need to get some important tree diameter, tree metrics such as DBH, which stands for diameter at breast height. So it's basically a diameter calculated at a point on a tree that is 1.37 meters from the base of the tree. A main stem taper profile, which basically means a full diameter profile where diameter is calculated at every 1 meter or so interval, and a total height of the tree. So actually, this project was done in collaboration with actual forestry researchers back in Virginia Tech, that is Professor Corey Green and his team. And they told me that some of these important metrics are very hard to get. Basically, a main stem taper profile requires them to basically cut down an entire tree and measure it by hand, meter by meter. And as you can see from this image right here, this may not be a very you know uh, very easy task. And now imagine this doing at the scale of the entire forests. So a question can be asked here: can robots in the form of autonomous UAVs help us in this situation, or help forestry researchers in this situation by accurately measuring the tree diameter stats, and as well as doing it at the scale of the forest? And the answer to that is yes, they can certainly help. So the image on the top right here is that of the Kumar Labs Falcon 4 UAV platform, and it helps forestry researchers in by putting three important properties down on the table. First, it can obviously fly, so it can cover a lot more ground than humans can, and it can also go to those areas where humans may find it like challenging, because there is like traversability issues, because the slope is too big. And it consists of a mounted lidar which can accurately measure tree stats and map them. And it also consists of an onboard computer right here, which can run algorithms that can facilitate autonomy into the picture. And this is where true scalability, in my opinion, can be induced, where a single forestry researcher can deploy a team of UAVs into the forest to survey it at scale. But all of this is easier said than done, because flying robots autonomously in environments like forest represents a very complex perception action loop problem, where essentially you need to perceive your environment and take actions accordingly. And at the heart of this problem, there's a need for a robust state estimation system, because unfortunately we cannot use GPS accurately in forests. And even the problem of like mapping trees and like measuring them accurately is also an issue, because UAVs with their resource constrained platforms need to understand what information to keep and what information to throw away, which is basically me saying we need to semantically understand the environment and map it, which is an example of that can be seen here, where only the tree trunks on a ground plane is basically kept. So with all of this understood, let me propose the contributions of this work. First, a robust state estimation system is built for long-range autonomy and mapping by replacing the current visual inertial odometry system with that suffers from a lot of problems in the forest, with a more stable LiDAR inertial odometry system. The system is tuned, and robust odometry and mapping capabilities are demonstrated. Then the system is taken into the real world, where real world forest data of almost 20 trees are collected at the forests of Virginia in collaboration with Virginia Tech. Basically, a semantic map is built from those trees. Individual trees are extracted and fed into a diameter profile pipeline, which essentially extracts valuable metrics for forestry researchers, such as DBH and a main stem taper profile. And the extracted diameters are then compared with ground truth measurements that we get from our collaborators. So let me start with the first section, which is LiDAR inertial odometry for autonomy and mapping. So if there already exists a VIO system, then what is the need to replace that? Well, the need arises from the problems that VIO systems face in the forests. Basically, visual odometry works by finding good features in the environment and then essentially tracking them across frames. But this problem is exacerbated in forest environments because they're very unstructured and cluttered. And the fact that cameras have limited FOV doesn't help the situation because they can only track a few points. There's also a lot of vegetation interference, basically canopy that is present on the branches, interferes with all of these points, making them hard to track. Canopy in the presence of a high level canopy that basically covers the skies and prevents the sun rays from going into the forest can cause massive illumination changes as you move from one part of the forest to another, and that can further degrade the system. And obviously there's a lot of dust and leaves blowing into your camera directly, which can cause a loss of calibration. So lidars can help in this situation because they're not plagued by any of these problems. They have a full omnidirectional 360-degree horizontal field of view for more robust feature tracking. They are not affected by illumination levels because they don't care about the external lighting conditions, and you don't need to calibrate them because their observation models are essentially fixed ones they are built. So enter Faster-LIO, a state-of-the-art robust LiDAR inertial odometry system that is able to give great odometry and mapping performances because the authors that created it basically used all of the best properties of other LIO systems. So what makes it so capable? Basically, the authors are using a tightly coupled LiDAR and IMU system here, where the LiDAR with the IMU measurements are directly fused into the LiDAR so that they can compensate for motion distortion. A direct scan to map matching technique is used to compute odometry compared to other traditional methods that use feature extraction methods like lines and planes and smooth surfaces to do the scan matching process. So this is more accurate. And finally, they can reduce the computation load enough by using something called as incremental voxels, which is basically a parallelized method to store point cloud data structures and essentially compute nearest neighbor assignment matches for scan matching techniques. So with this Faster-LIO, we were able to easily integrate it into the autonomy stack that we currently have because the code was always open source, and it was easy to just write a few functions and process the data. Then we decided to fuse the raw odometry that is coming out of Faster-LIO with another IMU that is like more accurate using a UK filter. Then the UK filter was just tuned to adjust for the system. And with the system in place, we took flight. So our autonomous flight results are seen in these videos. So this is flying on LiDAR odometry only. And so both of these videos are recorded at the same location, which is the Pennovation parking lot. And the quad is trying to run loops around this parking lot while trying to dodge trees and other obstacles. So basically a whole kilometer of trajectory was flown and minimal drift was observed because the quad didn't fall out of the sky. And basically you can see that lighting conditions don't matter because we're able to fly robustly both during the day and the night. There is no requirement for repeated calibration, which increases the efficiency of the experiments. And finally, one LiDAR sensor is used for both flight and mapping purposes. So moving forward, let's talk about the odometry results. So approximately 25 experiments were conducted both in Pennovation and Wharton State Forests with an average flight trajectory of 600 meters, and the drift accumulated was just 7 centimeters on an average approximately. So the image here on the top left, you can see this is of the Wharton State Forest flying a 900-meter trajectory. And the image here on the top right is that of the drift that is incurred. So basically, since we don't have a GPS to accurately measure the odometry, the way we do it is we take off and land at the exact same spot in the world. And we measure the relative translation between the first initialized frame of the odometry and the last one. And if there is no drift, then they basically should match because we are taking off and landing at the exact same spot. So over here, this grid is 1 meter. The boxes are 1 meter. And the drift realized here is basically about approximately 25 centimeters. Similar experiments done at Pennovation, approximate trajectory of 350 meters, and the drift here is even more negligible. So with superior odometry results come superior mapping performance. And basically the mapping results that you can see here in the video are like the LiDAR point clouds are being stitched together perfectly. And that proves to the stability of the odometry system. We also wanted to compare how well this is doing against other odometry systems. So we used a system known as LLOL, which stands for low latency LiDAR odometry for spinning LiDARs. And LLOL uses traditional scan matching techniques where features need to be extracted and then matched against successive scans. And this can be degenerated in environments where you don't have good enough features. And this is shown in this image here, where LLOL basically double reconstructs cars at Penovation in a 2-loop mapping experiment, whereas Faster-LIO can still maintain stable mapping performance. So with this system in place, we can now finally move into the forest for a diameter estimation pipeline. And the first step in this process is to basically extract semantics in the form of tree trunks from an entire forest. So in order to do this, we use a deep learning system because this can generalize to different forests and truly extract the meaning of trees in the form of like semantics. So as with every deep learning system, the process starts with data collection and labeling for segmentation. So a total of 20 different tree varieties of different species were collected across 2 forests. And basically the system, and there were 2 sensing modalities that were used to collect this data. Basically a hand carried system, as that you can see here, basically me putting the cord on top of my head and trying to collect data by just pitching the LiDAR up and down. And here is a more practical way to collect data by actually flying the cord and basically just collecting the data at a very high distance. So the reason this was done is because we wanted to compare the advantages that flight systems can bring over traditional methods of collecting data, which is usually the way this is done here using a LiDAR backpack or something. So in order to label all of this data, we used an open source labeling tool called as SIL, which stands for Semantic Integrated LiDAR Labeling, which was developed by one of our lab mates. It's open sourced. So one of the advantages that SIL has is that it allows you to accumulate all of the point clouds at once and basically label all of them together. So this makes the labeling process very easy, that you can see here in this video, the accumulated point cloud and the corresponding labeled tree trunks. Talking about the actual deep learning system, we used a RangeNet++ model. This is a contemporary deep learning system for end-to-end LiDAR-based semantic segmentation. The results are can be obviously seen here, with the network being able to nicely segment out the tree trunks in red and all of the background in gray. So one of the advantages that RangeNet++ brings is its simplicity. It can work on board a resource-constrained UAV platform, and basically it also brings the simplicity into the picture because it works in the range image domain rather than working in the point cloud domain. So range image is just a spherical projection of a point cloud with much fewer points to process, and hence you can use like simple 2D convolutions to process this entire data end to end. And this example can be shown here in this architecture diagram, where a simple encoder decoder network is built to process this entire data end to end. And if you need more speed, you can swap this decoder for like smaller decoders that can run much faster inference. The raw range image results are seen here in this picture. This is the range image input of the forest. All of the tree trunks segmented as a binary mask in like green. And this perfectly or almost close to perfectly matches the ground truth, which speaks for the accuracy of the algorithm. So now that semantic segmentation is done, we can move on to the single tree diameter estimation pipeline. First thing, we need to convert semantic segmentation into instance segmentation so that we can operate on each tree instance separately. This is done using DB scan clustering techniques to essentially map out or take out all of the tree trunks individually, as that can be seen here using different colors. Then this is pushed into a control point sampling module. So this is just a fancy name for basically discretizing the entire space of discretizing the entire height of the tree instance and sampling control points. If you can really squint, you can see the control points all over the place in red over here. Then we move into the ring extraction module, where a local ring neighborhood around these control points need to be extracted. So as the LiDAR scans the tree trunks, basically these rings represent the curvature information of the trees, and a diameter can be estimated from that. So yeah, basically I feed this system into a KD tree data structure, which basically builds a binary search tree out of all of these points so that fast indexing can be done. And it also gives the advantage that, if there are certain holes that are induced into the system because of false positives, we can still get the entire ring to calculate the diameter because it's region-based indexing and it's extremely fast. So a diameter is calculated for every single control point, but this is just one instance. And there are multiple instances of trees coming in from multiple different views at different heights for different trees across different timestamps. So the next step that we need to do is basically accumulate all of them. And this allows us to associate all of the control points to a single tree. And this also allows us to correct for like height ambiguities if the quad is flying very high. And I built this simple UI tool that in case if you need like a diameter for a single tree, you can just click points on this UI and they give you like cluster labels. And once all of the data is basically processed into a lookup table, you can just look up what cluster you want. And this gives you the height and diameter measurements of all of the trees. So now that we have the measurements, let's see how I do against the ground truth. Basically, note that we did two modalities of data collection, and we are trying to measure two important factors, the DBH and the full profile error. All of this is summarized in this table and averaged for all of the 20 trees for which the data was collected. I prefer the median error because one, it is smaller, and because mean error can get skewed if you have like a few false positive detections and bad diameter estimation somewhere at the top, which I will talk more about. And essentially for hand carried systems, you can see for both DBH and full profile median errors, they are both within 1 centimeters. Flight systems generally do a little bit more bad, where the error is within 1.5 centimeters. But here comes the main advantage of using flight, which is they are where hand carried systems are only able to measure 20 to 23% approximately of the ground truth tree height. Flight systems are able to do double because obviously they're able to fly without losing too much on the accuracy. And I also did some time complexity analysis. It just takes 0.02 seconds to basically segment out and get all of the diameters, which makes the process real time. So let me give a little bit insights on where exactly the errors come from in the flight systems. So the tree on the left is circled. So that is the tree in concentration. All these squiggly green lines are the UAV trajectories. The graph on the right shows the diameter errors for the tree plotted against the height. And this is done for both hand carried and flight systems. Basically, as you can see, these branching over here that gets falsely clustered into the tree trunk causes the errors to like spike. And suddenly when there's no branch, the error falls somewhere over here. And when the error, when the branching comes back, the error rises again. And similar is the situation with having too much vegetation being clustered into the main tree trunk. It dilates the tree trunk and causes a problem in accurate diameter estimations. So over here, this point kind of lies where this vegetation comes into play. And similarly, vegetations at high levels can also cause errors to fluctuate up and down. But regardless of all of this, I feel like a good diameter estimation pipeline is built, which can accurately estimate diameters up to 1.5 centimeter accuracy, basically from a flight system. I feel like labeling more data would certainly help the deep learning system filter out more of the false positives, and using ransack-based outlier rejection techniques like directly fitting circles to those rings to estimate diameter rather than what I'm doing right now, which is just fitting the biggest quad to estimate the diameters, would also help take out some of the outliers. But regardless of all of that, I feel like a good baseline system has now been established that can create a lot of values for forestry researchers. Basically, I was able to process all of the diameters for hundreds of trees. I mean, we did it for just 20 trees, but I'm able to do it for hundreds of trees and get thousands of diameters basically in a single day. Whereas the researchers at Virginia Tech, it took them months, if not weeks, to actually cut down the trees and measure them by hand. So a lot of value is already created here in terms of efficiency. And finally, this brings me to the concept of fine-grained mapping that I mentioned before. Basically, fine-grained semantic mapping, where you combine semantic mappings of tree trunks with more fine-level detailed information of trees, of diameters, so that they can really be beneficial to forestry researchers, as they can keep these periodic maps and track the growth of our forest, which I believe can also improve silviculture literature in the future. So before I end this presentation, I have a lot of people to thank, without whom this project would not be successful. So first of all, my advisor, Vijay, the principal investigator of this project, Pratik. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this project. And I thank you for your guidance, your insights, and obviously paying for all of the fancy equipment and the nice field trip to Virginia Tech. Professor Corey Green and his team, who hosted us at Virginia Tech and taught us a lot about forestry research and basically worked very hard to get the ground truth diameter estimations. Shu, that helped me a lot, helped me by understanding the autonomy stack a lot, helped me integrate the Faster-LIO into the autonomy stack. And he is the one that is running behind all of the, UAV experiments to make sure that it doesn't fall out of the sky by safety piloting it. And he also helped a lot with the data collection at the Virginia field trip. So thank you. And also finally Dexter and Ife, who also helped come along the Virginia Tech field trip and help collect the data. And finally Derek and Jujo, who helped with the Faster-LIO integration and running autonomous flight experiments. And with that, I conclude my presentation and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Okay, so the question. Mhm. Yeah, so the question is basically, can I achieve better computation speeds? And if not, if I can't do any better, can I see this work being used on a different avenue? I think I can certainly achieve better computation speeds because I think the pipeline is still bottlenecked at the point where maybe not in terms of speed, but definitely like memory, because I need to accumulate all of the control points at some point so that I can associate them properly to a single tree. And maybe if I can find out a way to do this in real time where I will, like I mentioned, semantically just accumulate the points that I need and then throw out the rest of the information, that would help the pipeline a lot. In general, the future of this work, what I see is maybe like full volume estimations, because I'm only able to get like diameters for the main stem. Maybe something like branching and all of the other important stuff that can come into the factor can also help forestry researchers a lot.